All right, we got Caleb.
Right here. How's it going, Van?
Yeah, that song always gets me pumped up. It's stuck in my head. It's in my dreams. It's like on loop. It just keeps playing. It's crazy. What's up, Caleb? By the way, good morning to you.
Morning, man. Did you create that beat? Did you mix it yourself?
Oh God, no, I'm not that talented. We have way more talented people behind the scenes making that, making the music and making the screensaver stuff. But it's been great. It's crazy to think we've been doing this since April of 2021. We're almost, 2 years since we started doing this call, and there's been so many great things in our business that we've added to, supplement the stuff that's already great. But this has been one of them. So I want to say thanks to everybody that's involved behind the scenes. Thanks to all the speakers. Thanks to all the listeners, the questions. It's been a pleasure to be able to host this thing. And, I've learned a lot, and I continue to learn a lot. My guys love it. And for the people that hop on and take things from it, we try to make sure that, you guys are getting the best of the best information from the best owners, twice a month, where it's a topic. It's sort of similar to a Dallas that we talk about in the past, but you guys get to hear from people that, we're in your shoes. We're leaders. We're people building teams not too long ago. And then you hear from people that like Larissa or Jess Irish or Larry, who have huge organizations, and they built teams a long time ago, but the fundamentals remain the same. So thanks to everybody. Hope you guys have a very safe holiday and a good new year. Today, you guys are going to get to hear from one of the best owners right now in our business in terms of, driving sales, having huge headcount. He's putting out promotions that have huge headcount. Caleb, coming out of Riverside. Caleb, you ready to go today? You excited?
Oh, definitely.
Well, I'm really excited to talk to you. And just so everybody knows, we have a lot of great speakers coming up. We got Bud, who's going to be interviewing Subi. We got JP talking about team building, Crystal talking about student mentality, Lamine talking about opportunity. So you got a huge slate of great speakers coming up. Plus we got the regional conferences coming up. Plus we got R&R. I mean, holy crap, this is going to be a really exciting 2023. But Caleb, you've been one of the really great bright spots of this year, because of just you coming from, Richard's organization, but then coming from Aaron people forget Aaron has a ton of offices, right? And so part of Richard's growth has been Aaron, and then you coming from Aaron. And you were telling me that you were one of Aaron's first leaders when you went to Riverside. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was the first leader that he promoted out here in the Inland Empire area. So I think I was in like his second or third orientation class since he moved out. Yeah.
Pretty crazy, Hunt, to see what's happened since you were his second leader in the office.
Yeah. So now at this point, I've watched Aaron grow from I've watched him grow from 7 guys, then I've watched him grow from 2 guys into 10 offices now in his organization. So
And that happened in what, the last, how many months? A year and a half? What was that time window?
I mean, that time window was less than 2 years. It's almost going to come up on 2 years now since at the end of January. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've taken that and you've applied it to your own business and your background. And we like to mention the background. So people, when we network with each other and you guys do Zooms and you have new people, we want you to get to know the owner's background a little bit before we get into the topic. So you came from film study. So you were going to school in Hollywood and did bartending. So that's your background. So this is very different than that, right? Very different than film study. But what got you excited about this business and how did you use your prior experience to help you in this?
Yeah, so I mean, I came from like more art school backgrounds, not at all business minded, business focused at all. The whole reason I got into this was because COVID had basically shut down the film industry and also I was bartending at the time, and that wasn't the whole service industry was also not really up and going. So I just had to start looking in other areas. I was like, all right, I don't want to sit around and just do nothing. I want to do something. And so I thought I would get into just marketing just to get some basic skills, but I had no experience in that. And, I always tell my guys this when they first came in, because a lot of them also don't have experience. And like, I was one of those guys applying to places, and the main thing they wanted at least like 3 years worth of experience or a degree in that field. And I didn't have either one of those. And so when I stumbled upon the job posting for Aaron's company, it was like, high school equivalency needed. And I was like, all right, cool. Well, I got that. So,
Yeah.
this was a little bit something that I could do. It might be some very low end entry level job, but I was willing to do it. And what got me excited about it though was, first stepping into it, I was shown the field in the second round interview. They actually took me out, and I was Stephen Campbell, who is one of Aaron's other outside promotions in Chicago, who's an absolute animal, but he was the one that took me out and showed me that there was door to door, which to be completely honest with you, Van, was probably in my top 3 jobs I did not want to do probably in my whole entire life. So I just kind of took it, at least going, hey, this is something that like, at least I get some form of experience, and maybe it just could become like a resume builder for me. But it was really actually talking with Steven, and I'm just going to kind of give a little brief synopsis of Steven's background. He told me basically that he gave up running one of his dad's companies where he probably make $300K a year to do this. And he came out to California from Texas to help Aaron open up the Nestle market and knock on people's doors. And I was kind of just like, why did you decide to do that? Like, what made you reach that decision? And that's when he kind of broke it down to me, and really he got into about like what you could really do with this type of business, where you could go, the types of, he brought up the NCs and the RCs, what they do now. And eventually I got a chance to go to see Richard's office in Dallas, and if you've never visited Richard's office, it's a whole different experience. He's just got such an amazing organization. And that's when I really opened up my eyes of like, okay, this is something I want to do now. So yeah.
You hear it all the time, everybody, get your people to travel and see other offices and see bigger picture stuff. It impacts people. And sometimes they don't say it. They feel it, and then they think it, and then you see their actions take off. So we're lucky to have you, Caleb. You've been a great influence and an impact on the rest of the business, and you're just getting started, and your wires are huge. You're running a ton of guys. I mean, it's really exciting to see, but we got a call to run. So let's do this thing. We're going to go over initial training, and everybody that's on the call, is our last call of the year, right? We're going to go into it. So get everybody you can on, text the group, say, hey, we got to listen in. This is going to help you guys retain people. We talked about recruiting. Initial training is what gets people to stick, right? You got them hired, This is what gets them to stick and gets them to get into leadership. And that's when you get people locked in, all in, because they want to become an owner, right? That's where the magic happens. And Caleb's become very good at that when people first get hired. So Caleb, the floor is yours.
Yeah, awesome. So that's great. Like we talked about, Pat talked about recruiting last time, and obviously that's a very important aspect. I'm very big believer in having large training classes, and really like letting the field kind of filter out the ones that are really going to stick with you. But if you really want to get the right people on, like the people are really going to be like your next leader, your next promotions, it all starts with the initial training. And one of the things that I think comparatively that I really try to stress is having preemptive conversations and going over expectations right at the beginning. One of the things is that one of the things that or sayings that I really like is the ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure, which just means that if you can preempt them on every sort of negative that they might encounter while they're going through this business, it's a lot easier than for them to kind of later on figure out or just find out for themselves. There's just one thing that new people really hate, it's surprises. And I'm a very blunt person. I think all of my guys could probably attest to that. I'm very straightforward with them about what's to be expected and what the road to management is going to look like. I don't try to sugarcoat it. I don't make ownership like the end all be all for people. I tell them straight up of like, this is what's going to be expected moving forward. So that is all planted, not just from like the first day, but it's done in the interview. It's done in the rehash calls that I really train my guys of like going over what the field will look like. I mean, obviously it's not like just to make it sound like a harrowing experience for them, but it's to prepare them really for any sort of negative and how to handle it right off the bat. And then again, I stress this during orientation. Main thing is that you got to really just stress what your LOA has to look like for them and kind of get them to make a commitment at that point, of really that they have to be hitting the metrics every single day. And if you don't, then we're kind of slacking on the standards. And also I address the turnover of the business right off the bat to them. I do this in orientation. I think it's good because it kind of puts a fire under people's bellies, because like if I tell them like, hey guys, everybody in this room, some of you guys are going to be gone by the end of the week. Some of you guys, might only get a few weeks in, and you'll notice that like your entire training class is gone. And I'm really looking for like maybe the 2 or 3 of you who are really going to be making it in this business, or who's actually going to be able to step up. And I like doing that because a lot of the new guys, when they hear that, they're like, okay, I'm not going to be the person that leaves. And that's what kind of gets them a little bit more like, I'm going to stick through it. I'm going to figure this out. But one of the other things that we do, and I don't know, Elise, I don't know if we put this on the slide, Elise, but yes. Okay. When we started doing this, we picked this up in Richard's office, and I think it really has worked well for us. Is we give them a contract before they go out on their first day. You can write it up on like a whiteboard. You could write it maybe on like an actual piece of paper, print it out for them. But as you see, this is the contract that we have for them right there. Just do you agree to have a great attitude all day? No matter what happens, no matter how many no's we get, you agree to remain positive. And at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. We have to move fast. Faster we move, the more people we talk to, the more money we make. And is that something that you're okay with? I don't want to hear you complain. I've pretty much stressed right off the bat why it's so important for us to really remain positive. And especially in this kind of regard, when we go about explaining it, we're like, hey, like you're going to definitely hear a lot of no's, and you're going to hear some yeses, you're going to hear a lot of no's, and people are going to express it in their own way. I kind of flipped the table. I'm like, hey, if I came up to your door right now and I offered this product, what would you most likely say? And most of the time they're like, I'd probably say no to you. I'm like, right. So now you're going to be in my position. So I want you to like kind of like take that, and that is what is your day is going to look like. Be prepared for it. We know it's hot. We know it's cold. We know that sometimes it can get frustrating. We know sometimes, for us, our tablet systems are slow or things don't always work out how we want to. We already know all these things. So, us kind of, if you tell me like, hey, it's really hot right now, well, that doesn't help me. I know, like we know. So I don't want to hear you complain. And if they do complain, then I'm like, hey, you signed the contract, remember? Like, are you not a man of your word? And so that, I think, it gets people kind of to understand a little bit of like what we're doing and what to expect, and really about the importance of attitude. And I know it's day one, and I tell them your attitude's not going to be as strong as the leaders is. Right now, you're going to be, for the next few days of training, you're really just going to be seeing your leader's pace. And we just expect you to keep up with them. When you get on your own, I mean, you're going to have your own pace as well. But it's just important that we're still hitting those metrics. I really like this contract. I really think a lot of the new people, like it just kind of helps things click for them a little bit more, and also kind of just to crush all the negatives, or crush any sort of complaining that might kind of occur from having to go out in the field.
Nice. Well, and I don't know if I mentioned this because we talked about it, but he's got the highest head count, right, on AW. He's got, his promotion has the second highest head count, sometimes the third, but he's running the most guys, right? And the quote I love about this was, ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure, right? So one of the things, Caleb, you're talking about is the fact that you have new people that come in that are sort of can be in a fragile state of mind, right? They're any little thing that happens to them, is gonna, it's like kind of like a child, like, when you get her a baby, everything makes you cry. So it's like you got to really talk about the negatives way before they happen, right? Because surprises is what screws people up, right? And frustration is when expectations are not met, right? Or when something unexpected happens. So Caleb, you do a really good job of basically talking about every negative that's going to happen before they experience it. So it's almost like you got like a magic crystal ball and you're telling them what's going to happen before it happens. And I think, you may have been doing that the whole time, but you understand what it's like when you don't do that. And before you had the contract and before you were talking about turnover, you were probably hiring a lot of people, but those people weren't sticking as consistently. So what was it like before you made these changes? When you would hire people, it was all enthusiasm, but then you weren't talking about the negatives. Because I think some of us are afraid to talk about the negatives. We think if we talk about the negatives, people are going to get negative. But when you position it like what's going to happen, it completely gets them prepared for it. So when it does happen, they say, wow, Caleb was right. So how much has that helped you? Excuse me.
Oh yeah, so much. So I mean, we were actually always like mass recruiting, but we would just lose entire training classes of like 15 to 20 guys sometimes, and like none of them would stick, or like which is pretty bad considering you think of out of 20 people, not one of them becomes a leader. It's pretty bad. So I'm looking back on it. Yeah, it is like when you try to just do only enthusiasm, only make like, if you're kind of looking at it through like these rose-colored glasses all the time, like they see through it right away. All right, like they're saying like, okay, this is not the coolest thing in the world. Like we're sitting and talking about how great everything is, and we sound like we're brainwashed, or we're just not down to earth at all. So I think it's like, yes, getting like excitement is extremely important, but you also got to be real with them. Be very, very real with your guys. And whenever something does happen, they might bring it up to me, and I'm like, yeah, what'd I tell you? And they're like, yeah, you're right. Actually, now I understand it. And now it's easier to kind of break it down with them about how we can get better from this, or like, how we can prevent these types of things from happening. And that's just helped people a lot. It's just kind of more like it's like toughing them up mentally before they get out there in the field in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think people's imagination is a lot scarier than the reality. So when you just tell them the reality, sometimes it cures this crazy imagination that they have of what could happen and what will happen.
All the time.
I love the contract too. You're getting people to sign this. Hey, it's for fun. Obviously, it's not a real contract, but it gets people in the mindset to have a good attitude. So really good stuff, Caleb. I love it.
Yeah. So then I guess the next thing really is that your training just needs to be structured. Really, like when we're kind of go into it and we're just trying to explain everything to them, if we're not focusing on like one or two things every day for them to really focus on, like they're not going to retain anything. That's been my sort of experience. Like sometimes we'll expect them day 2 to have like all the processes down, but all they've really done is shadow it. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to introduce one thing to them that I want them to focus on their first day. And then the second day, I'm going to add on a little bit more. And then the third day, a little bit more. And then eventually now they should have the entire processes down. So kind of just like an example that I have is just like I do 3 days of training, and if some people do 4, depending on the program, we really just do 3, which is, day 1, I just go over gotta know the compliance, their basic pitch, and the 5 steps to a conversation. So that way, like when they're out there on day 1, they have one thing to really focus on, which is doing everything compliantly and making sure that they are getting their basic pitch structure down. I don't really worry about anything else. And so that's all I want them to focus on. When I tell my guys, I'm like, all I want you to do for your first day, at least for us, is just, hey, get the customers cards, get to the close, and that's it. So they don't have anything else to worry about. They have one thing to focus on. All right, day 2, and then it's I add on like tablet process. We do product knowledge, and at the end of the day, we do a break-even sheet for them. But really, it's like that way I can slowly sort of build up on things to prepare them for the future. So that break-even sheet, we'll definitely go over that a little bit later, but extremely important, I think, to do right at the beginning. But just introducing gradual things. And once you do that in Atmo, like I do all these during Atmo, then when they get to the field, I go, okay, I want you to only focus on those things that we really talked about today, so that you can become you can become an expert, at least in those fields. And the basic sort of structure too. I mean, I know for us, for door to door, at least, it's always a 3-1. I really stress to my guys that in initial training, you cannot just have your guys sit there and shadow you. I've seen a lot of people, I've seen offices that do that, like people that they bring their trainees and all their trainees do is just watch them the whole day. And that to me is like, it's a complete waste of day. And also when you do that, you actually kill their confidence more. They're going to be even more scared for the second day because they just sat there and watched you do it and going, I can't do it. I can't do what this person's doing. So I really make it sure that in that first day, initial day of training, that they're active, that it's a 3-to-1 ratio of every 3 pitches or every 3 interactions that the leader does, they at least do 1. And then by the time the second day comes around, it's 50-50. Third day, it's all them. Right. With just the leaders kind of there to just sort of kind of watch them at that point and shadow them. And another thing too that we do is like we do have that structure in place for the initial training, but obviously everyone's going to have different strengths. Everyone's going to have different things that they need to work on. And what has really also helped us that I've created is that every day when we break an entry level person down, I have a separate leaders group chat where they can actually take a photo of it and put it in the group chat so that the other leaders can see it. So that way, when they come in the next morning, it's not like, which really tends to happen with a lot of interns, they kind of just show up and they're present. And they're like, I don't really know what I should do. Like, I'm just kind of waiting for someone to come around and tell me something. And what's good is that once they come in, they talk with the leader. All the leader has to do is bring up their breakdown from that group chat from the night previously and go, okay, this was the game plan that we had created. Let's go do that. So let's say even if their leader, their actual leader themselves is like maybe busy doing an interview or something like that, any of the other leaders at that point know what that entry level has to work on right there. So that way that there's really no time in the morning where at all like guys should just be standing around not knowing what to do. It's like the game plans are right there for everybody of what we need to be working on with the entry levels.
Yeah. And I mean, it's got to be a helpful retention tool when people are pitching people sooner, getting more confidence sooner, and getting sales sooner. You talked about how leaders are thinking they're protecting their trainee by saying, let me do all the pitching. You're killing their confidence. Like these people, they didn't start at the job to watch you make money, right? They did it because they wanted to get the practice. And even though, Caleb, I'm sure there's a lot of people that maybe, they don't have a ton of confidence initially because they're trying to get down to the product knowledge or the intro short story. So it's really about, making people feel good about those initial intro short story and not putting all the pressure on it. But you guys are hearing Caleb, he's got a structure. It's like, listen, day 1, you're going to get this many talk tos, and day 2, you're going to get this many, day 3, you're going to get this many. So people in his business that are starting, by day 3 or 4, Caleb, I'm assuming you kind of know if someone's either going to stick around or not. Like, you're not going to wait till day 7 or 8 And I think a lot of owners do that and leaders do that. They hold on to people for way too long because they're not giving them the chance to actually build confidence. So I think it's a really important subject you hit on there, because if people are going out in the field and feeling like they're going to make money, they're going to have a higher likelihood of sticking. If they're thinking that you're just going to control the whole show, they're going to be like, well, I hope I'm getting paid for this. But that's kind of a touchy subject, because some people don't really know.
Yeah, it's kind of, you're babying them too much. And if you do that, you're kind of showing to them that you don't have confidence in them to do things right. So it's like, I know leaders, they get scared maybe to let their trainees do a lot more pitching because they're worried that they won't make as much money. But I'm like, when you do that, it shows that you don't really believe in them, and they can sense that too. They're like, I'm not good enough. Like right now, I'm hurting the whole process. And that is where you definitely are going to lose people, because they can't see themselves doing it. And that's the main thing I think in the initial training that we really have to do, is that they have to be able to see themselves doing this, being able to do this. And if you don't create that, then it's going to definitely reflect that later on after the next few days when they start to go a little bit more solo.
Nice. Very true. And I love the group chat thing. That's smart.
Okay, and next slide, Elise. Okay. Yeah. So, and then this is another big thing. I mean, so for my office, we definitely are very, very loud. And I really want that. Main thing is that after not only the initial training, but actually them adapting to the culture of the office. We have a lot of like inside jokes. We have a lot of, chants, things that we do a specific way. And we really want like the new people to really become a part of that as well. And if you can get them to do that, then that they're locked in. And for them to adapt to the culture, it's sort of the same thing with the negatives in the field. I actually preempt the guys on like what the office is going to look like. Yeah, I tell them, straight up in orientation, I'm like, hey guys, you're going to come in on like your first day full-time seeing Atmo, and you're literally going to think we're a straight up cult, because we're just going to be really excited, where energy is really important. But I explained to them why is it so important to be positive? Why are we so loud? Like, why is the group chat sort of so important that we need to be active on that? Why do we break down the days? Why are we working so many hours? And if you can really break all of those down to them, especially in ways that they can understand. I mean, I think of the easiest way to do it is for athletes, for people that play sports. And I explain to them like, hey, why is it so important that we're extremely positive and that we're really energetic in the morning? Well, if you've ever played sports before, or before you go out in the game, I mean, what did you guys normally do? And they're like, we usually chanted and got yelled and riled up, and like, yeah. Or like if you're a musician, right before you stepped on stage for the concert, what did you guys normally do? And like, yeah, got in a circle and pumped each other up. And like, yeah, exactly. So we do the same thing here every day, because we know we're going to have to go out and perform. So, if we go out there with like, if we go out there feeling, if you were going to go to a game and you were going to go out and step on the field and being like, wow, we're going to totally get destroyed right now by the other team. This is going to suck. Well, like, how are you going to perform that game? And they go, we're going to perform really bad. I'm like, okay, so if we're just bringing up a bunch of negatives that we don't want to deal with in the fields, and we're really focused on those going in it, how do you think your performance is going to be? It's going to be bad. All right. So would you say it's probably pretty important for us to really like remain positive and have high energy before we actually go out? Like, yeah, I can see that. Like, okay. So when you step into it, it's not weird. I always just flip the questions kind of back on them. Like, hey, if you were actually running an office yourselves, like, what would you want it to look like? Like, would you want people to always be complaining about the obstacles that they have to face every day? Do you want them to come in happy? Do you think that's important for them? Like, yeah, I'd rather have that. I'm like, okay, so it's the same thing here.
It's so great how much preempting you do. Like, and you're not only explaining, in terms of the field, like what to look out for the field, but you're also explaining the office and the experience they're going to have. And hey, we're high energy. Like, you come in, there's going to be music playing. Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think we're so excited? What do you think of the positives to that? And then you talk about, what do you think would happen if we weren't, right? Like, and then you use the analogies, and you base it on the people who are in front of you. but it's so important, guys. If you're trying to get people to think a certain way, you can't just tell them, hey, think a certain way. You got to reverse engineer it and say, why do you think we do this? Or here's why we do it. And then, he talks about, hey, if you were in the position to manage a team, would you want your people excited or would you want them not excited? Would you want high energy or would you want low energy? Would you want people to be communicating a lot or would you want very little communication? What do you think is going to be better? And it's great because then people say, you're right, right? So Caleb, when you do this, it's interesting because you're doing this with new people, right? When they first come in the initial part of the training. And once those people hear you explain it, they explain it back to you. How much has that helped a new person get into a bigger picture or a leadership mindset faster, right? Because our business is about speed. We want to expedite the inevitable, right? So if someone's not into it, right? We're like, of course, we want to give that person a chance. We want to be, calm and let them be themselves and figure it out. But the people who are into it, you're getting those people into leadership way faster. And when I networked with Richard, I was like, your people are getting into leadership so much faster. And they're not just in leadership, but they're excited about becoming an owner way quicker than I see other offices. So how much has that helped you? It's not about changing people who need more time right away, but the people who really want to make it happen, those people are getting into the mindset faster. How much has that helped you?
Oh, it's so much. I mean, just right off the bat, you see it when you preempt them, like rather than them kind of just showing up, not knowing what to expect, let's say, and like all of a sudden they're in the room full of shouting people. I mean, we still do get this with some people, like they're just staring, they're just looking around going, what is going on right now? And they're like, I just don't understand it. Rather than that, I love it because I bring them in and they already kind of know what to expect. And so I can now see it in their faces that they just are instantly more into it. They're smiling at it, or they even just start to join in a lot faster, which is definitely exactly what you want. And like, afterwards, it's just nice to, after I have, like, we have their first big atmo, I just go up to each of them. I'm like, what did you guys think? Like, was that about what like you expected or what you explained? And they're like, yeah, that's great. I think I love it. Like, I just instantly see the change rather than just being like that was strange. Like, I used to get just people like just covering their ears and just from how loud we were like shouting and just now though I just see them and I see that they're just they fall in love with the process so much more because they know why that we're doing this.
And Caleb, I know we have more slides to get to, so we're going to power through. But one thing I want to touch on, because Larry talked about it yesterday, you probably get people that they come in and you explain this, but they're still kind of like standoffish, right? And maybe they're not fully all in. With those people, I mean, and they could be good. Are you trying to put them in a box right away? Are you trying to force them to acclimate? Are you giving them time, right? If we've talked about this before about people that, they're kind of testing the waters, right? How do you deal with those type of people? Because I think a lot of people lose people because they see a person that's a little skeptical and they get frustrated too quickly with that person. They don't put themselves in their shoes and they don't do those extra conversations and relate and kind of say, hey, I get it. And of course, if a person's super negative, you got to get rid of them. But what do you do about those people that take a little bit longer to get into it? Do you try to push those people out super fast or do you kind of base it on the person?
It definitely based it on the person. It's really depends. So if I can see, and at this point, you pretty much know by like, if they're just overly skeptical or they're just kind of negative about it, then you do kind of just want to get them out if they're just negative.
Yep.
But like for those that are just like kind of testing the waters, I mean, that just means that I have to have extra, especially if they're sharp. If this is a sharp person that you can do this, then at that point, if they're not quite adapting as quickly, and to be fair, I was like one of those people as well. I just kind of take them aside and I make sure that I have the full conversation and really have them open up to any questions. But that's my main thing is I always want them to be able to come to me and ask questions about it if they feel skeptical about our business. I mean, I was when I was actually going through the training. It wasn't until later that like I really saw the bigger picture of it and understood it. So for them, I know it's very easy for myself to relate to them. And so I always just kind of actually bring those people and I spend a little bit of extra time having a little bit more extra conversations with those that really need it.
Yeah. And guys, leaders, owners, just be yourself. Like, talk about stuff that's not about the business. Sometimes when people only talk about the business, it freaks people out. Like, you freak people the F out if all you talk about is the business 24/7. Like, talk about other stuff, talk about where they're from, talk about where you're from, talk about your backgrounds. You know, yesterday I'm here in Destiny's office, and I'm meeting people, and I'm from the Bay Area. So I'm meeting all these people that are from this area. I'm like, oh, what part of Oakland are you from? Piedmont. They're like, no, Piedmont's weird. I'm like, I know it's weird. I'm glad you said it first. We started connecting on all these different things that had nothing to do with the business. And that's where people trust you more, because they see you're not like some robot, like you're a real person. And then you do this stuff because you have an opportunity. So all this stuff's really, really important. But everybody's got a culture. And you, Caleb, you got one of the best cultures in the business. But you don't want to alienate people because you don't listen to them and talk to them and make them feel like, hey, if you can't adapt too quickly, then you're out. So I think he does such a good job, though, everybody, of preempting people. So way more people get into the mode faster, but don't push people away that take them a little bit longer, because those people could be really special too, especially those sharper people that maybe look at this and say, hey, it's so different, but I'm going to give it a shot. Anyways, all right, we got to power through these. We got a few more slides. Let's do it.
Okay. All right, and at least we move on to the money. So the money aspect of this, this is extremely important. Obviously, this is a big reason why people oftentimes leave us, which is that we're not honest enough about what kind of money that they should be making. And that's why I think it's really important that on their like second days when I usually do it, they're given the personal break even. And at that point, they should fill it all out. We need to explain to them why. And my main reason is going, hey, like, this is that way we can help each other out. Because I know that, like, you might be, if you're scared about like the commission aspect of it all, well, like, the worst thing that you can do, and I always tell them this, is just suffer in silence. So that way I kind of want to be able to like this really helps to create the trust in the whole system, and the trust between you. It's like, if I know that you need to be making this amount and I see that your sales are only this, well, we need to have a conversation, because I want to know if, like, are you okay financially right now, or is this going to be something that pushes you over the edge? And so by kind of going over this, it allows me to break down their personal finances, and then I go over the pay again. And as I say down there, you go over the pay again and again and again and again, because I'm gonna be honest with you, people, I've seen it so many times, new people they just do not understand how the pay works. So they have no idea what their actual checks are even going to look like coming up. So it's, even as frustrating as it might be as an owner, as a leader, like, you just need to go over the pay structure with them so many times until they're rock solid. And another way to do that is just to actually break down your own personal check, like break down your last week's check in front of them, so they understand how you end up making that amount of money. If you had a really bad last week, though, I probably wouldn't show them that check, but I would also just do that for them, so then they know. And this really helps determine like their spending habits. You actually get a little bit better feel for the person. Are they someone who likes a lot of flash? And you gotta kind of want to help them to game plan of, like, what's a must have and what's nice to have, and what can we cut back on. Like, I saw with one guy that he had like $600 a month on just food, and I'm like, is that really something that, like, you need to be spending right there? If you cut that back by at least like half, you should be fine. You should be able to like get by on just half of that. And so it also helps me to, at least at that point, educate people, especially younger people, a little bit more on how to actually, they should be spending their money, kind of as more of an adult working in this industry. And like, asking the question, do they have other sources of income? Are they good? Is this, maybe a lot of my guys, sometimes this business right here is not really their main source of income. If that's the case, I mean, that means that they're really here for the opportunity. And so it's always exciting for those people, but for those that are maybe just kind of coming into it and they need a certain amount of money, you just need to be able to break that down to them. And I just know that by doing this in the beginning, it creates a lot of trust in you as an owner, and being upfront about what the pay structure would look like. And, basically creating that trust that if they are struggling, that they can come to you for anything. And that's really what our job is, especially as an owner.
Yeah. Well, we heard about the 3-day, 3-week, 3-month, right? People have talked about that a lot. The first 3 days, you get people to stick because of you. They like you. They're going to give it a shot, right? they're going to stick past the first 3 weeks because they're making money. And then for them to go past 3 months is like, they're really there for the opportunity. Right. So if you look at why, Caleb does such a good job of having people stick, there's a lot of different things, but the money part obviously is one of the biggest. And that's why, leaders, an office with high average paychecks is going to be so much better at retaining people because they're the example. They're not like making up stuff. Like, it's like, no, it's happening. And that's why it's so important for you as an individual leader to be the example, because you can't teach what you don't do. Right. And so it's like, you could talk about other people, but you've got to be the example of someone making $1,000 a week. Right. And it's not, we're talking about getting rich in the field. We know that's not where all of you guys are getting rich, but you got to be making, good money where someone comes in and says, hey, I'm going to do this to get to management. But you see here, they're getting it broken down. And, Caleb, that you break down the pay, and the guys are breaking down the pay in the second round. You're breaking down the pay in the orientation, but you say you break it down over and over and over again, because sometimes people need to hear it more than once, right? You can't just assume they know, and then they might hear it a certain way. But I love the fact that you have the guys sit down, you break it down, you go over questions, and you kind of help them start to manage their finances. Because a lot of people, this is the first time anyone ever asks them, hey, what do you spend a month? No one ever asked me what my budget was a month until I came into this business. And it was like, whoa, holy crap. I need to, cut back on some things. So, you guys all on this call got to realize, like, someone may like you, someone may see the bigger picture, but if they don't see themselves making money. That's it. Doesn't matter what opportunity meeting you run. That's the first wall they can't get past. So hugely important. And I'm glad you had this broken down. And Caleb, make sure we're going to ask the guys for you to send out your little break-even sheet at the end of the call, if that's cool.
No, it's completely fine. Yeah, definitely. Okay. And then, so next slide. Yeah. So, again, this is really the big thing here, I think, in the initial training. Now, we kind of talked about this, man. I mean, there's some guys that we might bring on and they already have a lot of confidence, but to be honest, most people don't. Most people are stepping into this feeling like they're really nervous, especially they know it's a commission job. And your main goal for the initial training is, again, like, you have to be able to get them to see themselves being able to do this for themselves at this point. One thing that I've definitely noticed is, again, when we talked about like the adapting to the culture, if they feel comfortable in the office, first of all, if they feel comfortable around the other team, that instantly builds up their confidence in the field right there. So it starts before the field, actually, of really getting them, again, not just like kind of thrown into all the shouting bits, but getting comfortable around the other teammates. And if they feel like they feel good in the office, they feel like they are coming in and like, this is a place that I'm enjoying right now, it instantly builds up their confidence in the field because they see everyone else that they like doing it themselves. And we always talk about the build, break, build, at least in terms of feedback for people, the positive sandwich that I like to call it. But especially for me, I think it's much more than that. It's like build, then break, and then build. Like, it's just like it's just a lot of building, like so much so, because it's really easy to, guys are messing up on their first day. It's really easy just to kind of want to instantly correct them on things, but the only way is that they have to feel good about themselves doing it. And that's why you really have to highlight just the positives for them. I know, like, that's exactly what Steven did for me. And once I felt like, okay, I really can do this, that's when I stepped out and started to, feel really good about going solo and having that confidence. And if it's not there, then if we feel like that we are constantly overcorrecting our guys, or they feel that way, and they're like, man, I'm not doing good. That's when I kind of want to get on my trainers a lot. Whenever I talk to like the entry level and I ask them how the day went, they're like, oh, I just need to work on a lot. I'm like, I kind of do turn the trainer. I'm like, why does he feel this way? Or why do they feel this way? Why are they not coming back feeling good about themselves? Because that right there just means that once they start to go out solo, they're just thinking so much about the things that they did wrong that it just destroys their confidence right there. And the one thing that you need to be successful in the field is just a lot of confidence in what you're doing. So my main thing is like, expect the best out of your people. Do not look at like all of the flaws that you see in the beginning. Just expect the best from them. Identify what they need. That being said, sometimes it also is really easy to get ugly child syndrome, which is basically we might be so excited for our guys that we might ignore the flaws completely. Some of the glaring flaws right there. Every parent thinks their child is the most beautiful child in the world, even if it's maybe the ugliest child. But like that's kind of the same thing for leaders with their entry levels. Sometimes they get so caught up in wanting to build them up into a leader that they just kind of start to ignore all of the glaring flaws of what they need to work on with them. And one thing that I do is like, Larry always talks about, matching people up to different owners, getting them talking. It's the same thing, I think, here in the office. Being a leader is like, you have to decide what is best for your person. So sometimes it might be that your personality is not quite the best fit. And it's kind of your job to maybe bring them to somebody else in the office who does match that as well. And I know a lot of times people are like, well, I'm their leader, they're my person. But I'm like, yeah, but you as their leader needs to decide what's best. And so you can help them, but you might not be the best coach for them at the end of the day. So like match the personalities. Don't kind of get caught up on like, they're my leader, they have to do it my way. Send them to someone else being like, hey, I have a guy who's a lot like you, and I would love if he could go on a car ride with you rather than me, and maybe spend the field with you instead.
Yeah, the what's crazy is like a lot of my career and even in the beginning stages of leadership, I missed that boat where I felt like I had to be responsible for everything that this person was excited about. I had to be responsible for, whether that I was getting the credit on this person's success. And, guys, you just have to let that go and realize like the key is just retaining a wider audience of people. And we all can relate to people that are similar to us, right? Me and Caleb could relate. We both bartended. So if I hired Caleb, we could be like, oh my God, you studied film and art. I studied graphic design. You bartended, I bartended. You're from California. I'm from California. We could hit it off a little bit. But what if I'm, hiring someone like Crystal, who's, former military, from Jamaica, like a woman, like I'm not any of those things. Like I could sit here and try to act like I can relate to her. But if I got another woman in the office that's in the former military, or I've got another woman in the office from another country, or another woman just in general that maybe can relate to her more, my best bet is to get them to talk and to get them to connect. Obviously that person's got to be a good example, but and it's not just doing that just sometimes in your office, it's doing that outside of your office too. And that's what we've been talking about a lot, is getting your new people to connect on Zoom with people that are way outside of your organization, just because you want that person to see themselves in the future. And we also mentioned the fact that Caleb, if I hired you, sometimes leaders are so possessive. They're like, well, you're my person and I've got to be with you all 3 days. If I hired you and I didn't have your background, but somebody else did, I might be like, hey, Caleb, I want you to spend today with such and such. As long as me and that leader understand, like, you got to do the right thing, I'll do the right thing for you. Leaders working together in an office and doing good cross training, that's where it's magical, because you can all utilize each other's differences to attract a wider audience of people, right? So in your office, Caleb, you probably have a very diverse office. You have a lot of people, you have to, right? So when you got all those leaders on the same page, that must make a huge difference, because you can cross train and people don't feel like, oh, I'm losing this person, right? Owners, they don't network their people. And then they think, well, if I network my person, I'm not going to get the credit for them. It's like, you're still going to make the override. You're going to get the credit for networking that person, right? And so it's kind of starts with the psychology as a leader in the office. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's a problem in ownership, but it all starts back when we're leaders. And so for you, how much has that helped you in terms of networking your people with each other, cross-training people to get that person to connect with someone that's like them?
It's 100%. I mean, like, it's such a big difference, especially like I just think of like, we have the super gregarious like leader who's just brimming with confidence, and they hire somebody who's like quiet and just naturally maybe a very shy and introverted person. I'm like, well, listen, like, they're gonna go out in the field with you, and they're just gonna be like, I'm everything this person is not. So like, I don't see how I can possibly be able to do this for myself. I'm like, hey, like, you as the leader, like, you know what your personality is like, and I also like, hey, when you're training this person, you're going to become frustrated too, because you just cannot relate to them and or like really how their coaching style is. And so like rather than you getting frustrated, instead send them over to the other guy who is like more of a shy and introverted, but a good example and hits the standard. And that's like you, that's actually you like being more of like an ownership mindset of like you're really thinking about what is best for your team and how can you actually build it faster. And you have a bunch of tools, which are the other leaders to help you with that in the office. And so it just doesn't make sense to me when leaders become possessive in that way, because I'm like, you're just going to stifle their growth and that stifles your growth as well.
Plus, it's easier, right? Like you don't have to try to be somebody you're not to try to relate to somebody. You become curious about their interest, but you're like, I don't have any idea about that. But you know who's really good at that stuff? This person. You should talk to them. And you obviously listen and you learn, but it just makes your life easier because now you don't have to be a million different people. You be yourself and you utilize all the different, clubs in the golf bag, as you've heard, and you use those to your advantage. It's just so important, guys, because you want to have a wide audience of people on your team. I see leaders, they only have people that look like them. That's it. And so their team is a bunch of them. It's going to take you way longer to build a team. It's going to take you you're not going to have as many people in your office when you're running an office. And that just makes your success a lot less. So it doesn't mean you can't be successful. You just have a lot less people. Anyways.
Okay. Yeah. Next slide, Elise.
I was going to blame Ken. Ken was using this link before the call and he said he was reaming people and he said, so we didn't get as much time to get started earlier. So I'm blaming Ken that we're running out of time, but it's okay. Caleb, go ahead.
All right, I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. So the main thing about the opportunity. So yes, the opportunity is everything. This is what we exactly want them to be able to see. But I've also seen it's too much too soon, overwhelming the new people with the opportunity. I've had guys like literally being like, all right, well, like you need to do all this so you can get into leadership. And once you're in leadership, I need you to do this, this, and this. And like they almost break down so much that you just overwhelm a new person. Like people don't necessarily understand the opportunity right away. When we talk so much about them and like, what we want to do, like they start to kind of just feel like a number rather than an individual, if that makes sense, I guess, because when you sit there and only kind of shove the opportunity down their throats, they just know like, okay, you're trying to get me into leadership because you want to get promoted. That's your main thing about me. That's why you're obsessed with me right now. And that's when the whole trust issue kind of really falls into place. Or it could be they just feel so overwhelmed by like, dude, I feel like sometimes people feel like they're failing or they're failing their leader all the time if they mess up, and if they do feel that way, then for sure that's going to be a way that they're going to end up as well. And so I don't really I don't try to shove the opportunity too much. I definitely explain the opportunity to them, and I explain to them why we have this opportunity in the first place. But I don't expect them to necessarily come on board like right away either. But what we do is just like, I sharing other people's success stories right now, getting to share Michael's success story at this point to people and other owners, like just sharing those is really helpful, but not so much of being like talking to them all the time about them running an office. Like that's just kind of scary, like honestly, to a new person. So you don't sit there and talk so much about that, but you do share people's success in the business and introduce them to these people, find an owner for them to network with, and really kind of just more like share your vision of why you want to do it. And that'll bring other people along. But if we're talking to them about like, hey, like, your goal is that you want to get into ownership. Not everybody's goal right away is that they want to get into ownership. Not everyone's goal is to become an RC or an NC in this business, especially in the first few days. They don't even really understand or know what that is. So it's really like got to be more of a gradual thing for them of sharing. If you share other people's success stories, that's what interests them. If you share your own vision, they're like, okay, like this person's really into it. And, if they share kind of like how they're a part of that, then like they will feel like they want to stick around and they feel like this is going to be a good opportunity, not one that's like just totally overwhelming for them. So hopefully, I guess this kind of makes sense, but opportunity needs to be like a gradual thing that you introduce them to. As the leaders in the initial training, like you get them to understand why we're doing this, why we have the opportunity, and share other people's success. but don't sit there and try to force the opportunity on them of like, they need to become a part of this. And, they need to do this because one day they're like, I've had guys like, you need to do this because one day you're going to be running your own office. And I'm like, that's a lot of pressure right there just to be hearing that. A lot of these people just came in looking for a job. So like, you're right now, they're just testing the waters with it. You share to them what other people have done with it, and that might excite them. That should excite them. It excites the right people, the right people who are going to stay. So that's really how we should go about explaining the opportunity. And for me, I always do during orientation, at least I always do the meeting that actually Matt Kelly ran for us a few Sundays back, which really was just breaking down the stats of what our business has been able to do for our clients and how much more we still have to go. And this is why we need it. So it makes sense to them why we're actually training people up for management rather than just being like, hey, we're just training people to management, and people don't really understand why. I'm like, well, look at our client list right now. We look at us like dealing with Verizon and having 40 million more leads that they want covered with T-Mobile and AW. They want us to move into 35 more states. And I just break it down, all the stats to them. So now it makes sense. They're like, okay, this is why they're doing this in the first place. And then I just share the success stories of other people, but refrain from ever telling somebody that they are going to be running an office.
I know we're closing in on our time here, but guys, this is one of the biggest things in terms of what's going to cause you to lose people is by freaking them out and overselling the opportunity and getting them to think they have to do this. Guys, you got to be cool. Like, it's like being on a date. You can't go on a first date and say, hey, I think I love you. Or you can't go on this first date and say, hey, not only do I love you, but I'm thinking we can have, a family and kids. Why don't we get married? What about kids and marriage? If you said that on the first date, now, of course, it might, if there's a shot it could work, but your shot is very low. What's more likely going to happen is you're going to freak them out, right? And so you kind of have to, the business is itself already selling itself. Like you're seeing people get promoted. You're seeing, you're on Zoom, seeing other offices. There's promotions all over the business. Like, you get them on calls, you bring them to the stuff. People will eventually come to you, right? It's kind of like that question of when do I start pushing people? Well, you start pushing them when they come to you and say, hey, what's this opportunity about? Right. But I'm sitting back, I'm teaching them, I'm being cool. I'm showing them people that are like-minded. I'm not force feeding them this opportunity. I'm just being cool. And eventually when people come to you and say, hey, like, so what's the deal with this? I want to be, an owner. I want to be a leader. Hey, I'm glad you asked. Well, now you got to do X, Y, and Z. Now you can start to position this business to people or push them. But man, we lose so many people because leaders are a little too gung-ho. And they're talking to people as if they're coaching them with their goals. They're not listening to the person and thinking about what's important to them at the moment. And Caleb, you couldn't be more right. Like, that's a big factor, is let the opportunity come to people. Don't force feed them. Don't try to make them into it too quickly, because you're going to lose people that way. So, all this stuff is about retention and just getting new people to kind of, slowly start to evolve into the person that you want them to be, but you can't make someone who you want them to be the moment you want them to be it. They're going to blossom and grow in their own way. So you don't want to mess that up. So it's so important.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, Lisa, if we can go to the next slide, should be the last. That really what you talked about, Van, is my main thing that I really go over with my guys. Where I'm like, if you really want to build up other leaders, that you can't force anyone to become a leader. You cannot force them to instantly be what you need them to be, or to completely be on board with the opportunity itself. All you can really do is you have to build up a relationship with them. They have to like you. They have to feel that you care about them, that you're a friend. And if they like you and they respect you, where they look at you and they really do see you as somebody that can help them grow, that somebody that has a lot to teach them, and they just, all you want is like, you want them to see you in the office, being around the owner, being like, doing like more of the back end stuff in front of them, and really them seeing you as like this coach and somebody that they really like, and they go, I want to be like this person. And all you can really do is build a relationship and just be an example for them. And that's really in the simplest terms for training individuals and for getting more leaders on your team. It's really just that they have to come in and feel like you care, And do they see you as somebody that they want to eventually become? And if you do that, boom, then you're, at that point, you're going to become an owner so much faster. I mean, you can't motivate somebody if you don't know their beliefs or convictions. It's something that I really do think is extremely important. Spending time outside the office with them, doing a one-on-one, doing one-on-ones outside. My guys are always doing this now, where they're setting up a time for them to go outside the office after the field, sitting down with somebody with a plate of food between them and just talking to them about whatever, a little bit more like a deeper conversation about themselves, and not really just talk about the business. And really the point is, if you do this enough time, or you invest into enough people, you're gonna invest into people where it doesn't pan out. It's okay. You're not entitled. I mean, I remember you actually saying this, but you're not entitled to them becoming a leader. You're not entitled to them becoming an owner, but invest enough time. The point of the business is you invest enough time into people, then you will actually end up building up a crew, and you'll build up an organization around you if you do that. But all it really starts with is that relationship and being the example.
Nobody owes you anything, right? But you owe them your best effort, right? And that's our business. That's really life. Nobody owes you anything. The customer doesn't owe you anything. Nobody owes you anything. But what you owe yourself is giving it your best shot. And that's where all you're trying to do is increase the odds. So you take 10 people to dinner, you build these relationships, you kind of know it going into it. 1 or 2 of them or 3 of them are going to work out. The other 7, 8, they may not. But you don't stop doing the dinners. You don't stop investing in people because the other 7 or 8 didn't, because the other 2 or 3 are going to become the people that you build your business with, that you open up, and you open up tons of offices with. Aaron went to Riverside and hired you and one other person, and those couple people, right, that 10% has built a big organization and is going to continue to grow. So all you guys remember, we operate on that law of averages, but you can't cheat the law of averages. You got to keep doing it right every single time. So, Caleb, this is a great call. If you got one more slide, let me know. But if that was the last one.
That was the last one right there.
Yeah. I mean, there's Caleb's info if anybody needs it. He's available. He's a great networker. He's a great student. So anybody that wants to connect with him, if you got anybody in your office that did film study or, was a bartender, here's another person you guys can connect with on Zoom. But I got tons of notes, Caleb. This was really, really incredible. Really appreciate you taking the time to break all this stuff down. And it was a great cap to an amazing year for yourself and for your people, and obviously for the organization you're in. And we have a lot of other success stories happening across the business, but you're definitely one of them, Caleb. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. It is an honor to be on this. So
yeah, seriously. All right, guys. Well, have a great holiday. Have a great new year, and look forward to doing these more as we go into 2023. All right, guys, take care. Thanks, Caleb.